but I'm going to go more into detail about what all of that means. We're not going to talk about the Tsar too much. We're going to more talk about the revolutionary history of the Russian people and try to go over where it all started. And we could turn to the first slide. Didn't start in Russia, it started in Germany. I tried. Okay. It didn't actually start in Russia. It started more in Western Europe, Germany, with these two men. 1848, they created a book known as the Communist Manifesto, inspired by the revolutions going on in Germany at the time. And essentially they created an ideology to want to address the Industrial Revolution that was sort of coming across Europe at the time. And they believed that capitalism and industrial capitalism was inhumane, and we needed an alternative solution to it. So they created the ideology of communism. I can't read that, and I bet unless you're in German, neither can you. But that does, rest assured, that does say the Communist Manifesto. And the book at the time more took off in like intellectual spheres, but as it was printed across the world, it became more accessible.
I missed the date. When was this?
1848.
Okay.
It became more accessible across the world, and that is when it got to Russia. There was
keep in mind that the Industrial Revolution happened in Europe before it happened in the United States.
Long before it happened in America. The Industrial Revolution, I argue, started in Western Europe in the 1760s. It was a very long period of history, and these guys were arguably at the bulk of it. And they felt, of course, that a lot of the social conditions that it was creating were inhumane and that they needed a new revolutionary ideology.
Can you give an example of the inhumanity that they saw?
You can think of when you see like the pictures of child labor, you see a lot of the people who were suffering because they couldn't get jobs, because if they were to complain about their job, they would get fired and couldn't eat. If you couldn't work at all, you didn't get anything and you just died.
There's a book about this in America, right? I think it's called The Jungle.
Yes.
Which is about like the meat factories. It's
The Jungle.
It's called The Jungle, right?
Yeah, The Jungle by Upton Sinclair was also inspired by communism and the communists Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Friedrich Engels, just a quick note, then we can move on. I like to note that this guy was a business owner. He owned a textile factory in Germany, but he was still a communist.
Interesting.
Anyway, that's not the only movement that inspired the Russian Revolution. There's one other thing I want to talk about. We can move to the next slide.
After the idea that communism was a better answer than capitalism, they really argued that the workers who are producing, they are the people producing the
should
textiles.
Own everything.
Yeah.
They should be in control because they produce.
Yeah. Why aren't they the rich ones? Why aren't they in control? They're the ones making the stuff. Rich guys sitting up in their tower counting their money, they're not making anything. There's nothing that gives them the ability, the honor of being the rich guy. Why do they own the people? Why do they own these things? So that is the idea of upending capitalism and basically saying, well, it's the workers who make the money, make the product. The workers should run the world.
Right, exactly. But that wasn't the only philosophical and ideological movement that influenced the Russian Revolution. If we move on to the next slide, I can talk about Russian nihilism. So we're finally in Russia. Russian nihilism was this large cultural change in Russia between the Russian people.
Can you spell nihilism for them?
Nihilism. I can also write it on the board if you guys would like. Nihilism also started in Germany with an philosopher, Friedrich Nietzsche. I'm pronouncing that wrong, I don't care. But it really took off in Russia with a sphere of different revolutionaries, philosophers, painters, like Ilya Repin, who's one of my personal favorite artists. He and all of these guys, they believed that there needed to be a change in Russia, that the conditions that Russia was currently going through under the Russian Empire were killing the people, and that the world was just a horrible place to live. That's essentially the bulk of what Russian nihilism was. And there was a lot of people from the left and the right, the communists and the conservatives, who fell into this movement and wanted a change and wanted to get rid of the Tsar, which leads to the first event I want to cover in Russian history, the assassination of Tsar Alexander II. Now, Tsar Alexander II, I want to note, wasn't a horrible leader. He was kind of like Russia's Abraham Lincoln. He was the one that freed the slaves in Russia and introduced a lot of reforms, but they still killed him because of what he represented. He represented the monarchy, the regime, the ancien regime, if you remember that from the French Revolution, which is very important for the Russian Revolution. And they wanted him dead because of what he represented. So a group inspired by both the ideas of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels and the ideas from Russian nihilism called People's Will threw bombs at his carriage and blew him up. This was the first example of a big revolutionary change happening in modern Russia. And this was what led to a second revolutionary group in Russia that is very important to talk about. Change the slide. The Revolutionary Socialist Party. These guys were actually quite moderate. These guys are not the guys that you think of when you think of the Russian Revolution. These guys were not communists. These guys were what known as social democrats. They just wanted moderate reforms, they wanted to get rid of the Tsar, and they wanted more democracy. This party would later go on to become the Mensheviks, who we'll talk about more in detail later. But remember this name, Alexander Kerensky, this guy right here. Because he is, besides the big three we're about to talk about, this guy is the big Russian revolutionary, besides the next three people we're going to talk about. This is Leon Trotsky. So we're finally getting to like the part where you guys all know. This is Leon Trotsky. He was born as in a wealthy Jewish Ukrainian family, and he was drawn to communism by his future wife when he was still in school. He believed in an ideology of communism known as permanent revolution, which would later be dubbed by the people as Trotskyism. And he essentially believed that once there was a revolution that happened in a powerful empire like Russia, they should work as revolutionaries to take that revolution and bring it to other countries around the world. He also believed in incorporating more democratic elements within communism and stuff like that, and that is why he is his own philosopher and stuff, right?
And so to kind of put it in context, it's very threatening to hear that someone wants to spread revolution to the rest of the world. It sounds very like threatening that they're going to bring it to your world and upend your world. But we have to remember that the idea of spreading religion is very similar to that. All right, yeah. Christianity spent part of their tenets of Christianity was to, all right, we're Christian, we believe in this, let's take it to the rest of the world and share our gift of religion. So even though revolution sounds like a terrible gift, that was still their idea. They want to spread, we're going to fix our country, and then we're going to spread the gift of our knowledge and our system and our setup to the rest of the world. So we have to be careful about communists bad, they want war all the time, and put it in context of what they're trying to do.
I want you to keep in mind, none of these people, neither the Tsars or Trotsky or Lenin or anybody else we're going to talk about, are really evil. None of them wanted to hurt anybody. None of them came in this with the intention of there becoming this giant imperialist global empire known as the Soviet Union. They all came in this with the intention of trying to create a better country for the Russian people. That was the original intention, and that changed over time, sadly. And even the Tsar, I wouldn't think, was like a bad, evil dude who just wanted to kill everybody. That's not how humans work.
Not all humans.
Not most
Stalin,
humans. Not
maybe.
most humans. Well, speaking of Stalin, that's the guy we're going to talk about next. Joseph Stalin.
It's very interesting that you picked a mugshot.
I
to
picked his
introduce
mugshot because I wanted to choose photos from the time.
We take 2 seconds. I gotta change my recording.